Hello, it's ShadeX, and Spongebob Sponge on the Run is mediocre.
Mediocre?
Sponge on the Run isn't awful by any means. It's an okay film, but overall it was a big disappointment. Besides the film not being as good as I expected, I am also annoyed by Viacom's decision to release the film. Sponge on the Run was in theaters in Canada. It debuted on Netflix for everyone else in November. But what about US citizens who want to watch the movie? Well, we have to wait till 2021 to watch it. And it won't be on Netflix, and instead will be on CBS All Access, which is being rebranded into Paramount Plus later next year. I am sick of all these new streaming services popping up. Anyway, I know you all are wondering how I saw this film. Let's just say I got it from some people who are on a ship. Anyway, without further ado, I'll now go over why Sponge on the Run cannot outrun mediocrity. This video has spoilers, so you have been warned. Sponge on the Run has an alright start. It begins with a montage focusing on SpongeBob and Gary's friendship. It's revealed that the two met at Camp Coral. The film even begins with some decent jokes, basically what you'd expect from a regular SpongeBob episode. The film's setup is that Karen tells Plankton that SpongeBob is the reason he can't get the formula, and not Mr. Krabs. This leads to Plankton kidnapping Gary and giving him to the film's villain, King Poseidon. The whole film is a road trip adventure where SpongeBob and Patrick go on a journey to Atlantic City. It's an okay setup at the start. However, this film overall is a mess. The film starts going downhill when Keanu Reeves shows up as the character The Sage. Keanu having cameo is fine, however, he ends up sticking around the whole movie. The Sage is a tumbleweed with Keanu's face on it. He gives SpongeBob a courage coin. After he is introduced, SpongeBob ends up in a Wild West town, and him and Patrick run into zombie pirate cowboys in a saloon. Then Snoop Dogg shows up for some reason, raps, and then leaves. Then Danny Trejo shows up as a Wild West villain called El Diablo. SpongeBob and Patrick then kill him by exposing him to sunlight. Well, he isn't dead, he turns into a tornado creature. I found this part of the movie a bit amusing. It's very absurd. However, all of that is revealed to be a dream. It is very clear this film is all over the place. Still, it is not clear if the dream sequence was real or not, as Keanu Tumbleweed is real. Keanu Tumbleweed reveals that Gary is captured by Poseidon, who is using him to treat his face. The rest of the film has Keanu Tumbleweed in it. I'll admit that I like Keanu Reeves, but there is a thing called too much of a good thing. I watched the film with friends, and one of them said that it would be more funny if the Tumbleweed just had Keanu's voice and not his face. I agree with this. Another thing a friend brought up is that Bubbles the Dolphin could have returned and played this role, as his voice actor Matt Berry is in this film as King Poseidon. Anyway, SpongeBob and Patrick go to Atlantic City and they fall for the place's sin. Then they realize they were close to Poseidon's palace the whole time. SpongeBob then gets on stage with Patrick and people mistake the two for performers, and he sees Gary being held by Poseidon. He reaches out for him, but the king won't give him up and names him Fred. This leads to SpongeBob and Patrick being set for execution. Besides the unfocused main plot, the subplot actually interests me a bit. The characters in this film clearly miss SpongeBob's presence. Mr. Krabs is clearly sad about this. Plankton uses this opportunity to take the formula, but he realizes that it isn't worth doing as Mr. Krabs is too depressed. Anyway, after all the supporting cast realizes SpongeBob is missing, they go to Atlantic City to find him. In other words, they gotta get SpongeBob back! One gag I really find funny is that Squidward does not care that SpongeBob and Patrick are being executed, but once he realizes that Kelpie G is performing, he decides to go. Anyway, Mr. Krabs, Sandy, Squidward, and Plankton go to Atlantic City and try to convince Poseidon not to kill SpongeBob and Patrick. To defend SpongeBob, all of them except for Plankton bring up past stories about how SpongeBob helped them discover themselves back when they all attended Camp Coral. These scenes feel forced, but I am not offended by them or anything. My issue with these flashbacks is that they are tacked at the end of the film and feel very out of place. If they were sprinkled throughout the film, I would have no issue with them. The flashbacks reveal that SpongeBob helped all his friends when he was at Camp Coral. SpongeBob convinced Sandy to become a scientist, befriended Patrick, suggested to Mr. Krabs to start a restaurant, and encouraged Squidward to continue playing clarinet. I'm fine with SpongeBob continuity changing, as retired text-to-speech cartoon duck YouTuber Stalgia explained it best. SpongeBob does not need set-in-stone continuity because it is a comedy. After the flashbacks, a musical number happens, which is alright, but not too memorable. Then SpongeBob convinces Poseidon to give him back Gary and tells him to free all the snails he used as skincare products that were imprisoned in his castle. The film ends with a cover of Take On Me by Weezer, and it is revealed that SpongeBob has new snails in addition to Gary, and that the people of Bikini Bottom have some of their own. It's then revealed that Bikini Bottom is now a snail refuge. It's a cute moment at the end of the film. The movie then ends with a dedication to Steven Hillenburg right after the film ends. While this tribute is nice, overall this film was the weakest of the SpongeBob trilogy. Sponge on the Run isn't the best written SpongeBob movie, but I will say that the animation in the film looks great. I was initially opposed to the CGI, but after watching the trailer, I was fine with it. It is really a shame that the writing wasn't up to par with the first two films. The first movie was great and is my personal favorite. The second is enjoyable as well, despite not being as good as the first. However, Sponge on the Run is all over the place. The story follows a formula similar to the first two films. However, these films execute the ideas a lot better. The first film was a fantastic adventure where SpongeBob and Patrick go to Shell City to get the crown, save the town, and Mr. Krabs. Sponge Out of Water is fun as well, as SpongeBob and Plankton work together for once. But Sponge on the Run just doesn't have the magic those films have. This is because the late Steven Hillenburg wasn't involved in the story of this film. It's possible he may have been involved with the original script, but the final project was definitely not what he envisioned. One fact I want to mention is that this concept art for the film looks way better than the final project we got. Honestly, I wish the third SpongeBob film went for the bizarre cats from space plot that it initially was going to have. If you want to learn more about that, watch Nintendo's video on it. I wish that cat film was the film we got, as that was an original plot and not a rehash of the first two films. Anyway, Sponge on the Run isn't terrible, but is definitely the weakest of the trilogy. It is a rehash of the first film and Gary Come Home. Speaking of Gary Come Home, there's a cover of Gary Come Home at the end of the film, which I thought was really neat. Despite not absolutely loving the film, I had fun watching it. Still, I understand if some people don't feel the same. I'm really disappointed that Nick decided not to screen this film in theaters, and is allowing it on Netflix everywhere else besides the United States. It really bothers me that everyone else gets the movie on Netflix, while Americans have to wait till it is on CBS All Access in 2021. Camp Coral will be on CBS All Access as well. That was going to air on Nick initially. Seems that Nick doesn't have faith in Camp Coral anymore because they were hyping it up to air on Nick, and now it's going to be on CBS All Access. Honestly, I'm tired of everyone feeling the need to make a streaming service. Anyway, overall, Sponge on the Run is okay, but I feel like Nick is really pulling the SpongeBob brand in a bad direction. Sponge on the Run is mediocre. This has been ShadeX, and I hope you all feel nothing but good vibes.